Hey, good morning. It's Leslie Spoor with Concierge Business Solutions. Oh, now Jeff's going to dance because usually I do. He's letting me open the show today, which is very unusual. Usually he takes control of that, but I said, let me do it. Let me do it. So let's see how I do. Today we're going to talk about a bit of a controversial issue. And so we're going to ask you to just be patient and hear what we have to say. And if you don't agree with it, that's fine too. And if you do, so much the better. We're going to talk about data centers today. I'm sure you've been hearing about them with all the AI stuff that's going on. They're going to need data centers. And so, Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about exactly what the data center is?
Well, let me finish this real quick. Banner, put this. Okay, so hey, what do you think about data centers? There's I think there's a misunderstanding about all data centers. All data centers are not created equal. In other
Right.
words, let's say up until the last 5 years ago, most data centers, Leslie, were used to process email, process Google folders, hold and store data. And they were using a certain amount of kilowatt hours, right? And it was pretty low. But when it comes to AI, it's these chips are a little bit more hungry for power, and they need more. And sometimes the people say, "Well, can't you just take the data centers we have and update them so that they're retrofitted to handle this?" The answer is sometimes, most of the time not, because it's so expensive to retrofit. It almost like saying, "Well, can't you take my 62 Chevette and turn it into a 2026 Corvette?" No, you can't. It's
No.
cheaper just to buy the vet. And so I think that's the first thing. The other thing is, there are several things that it does because it's AI. It has to have different kinds of cooling, right? You're still cooling the GPUs, the computer information in there. You're still cooling it, except now keep in mind it's running hotter, because let's use an example. Let's say in the older data centers, it's using 5 kilowatt hours, right? But the AI is using 50. Well, it's just running hotter. That's just the way it is. It's like touching a white car and touching a black car, and it's 100 degrees outside. The black car is going to be hotter. It just is, because of its nature. And so you're going to say something, Leslie?
Yeah, I was going to offer two points of view on that. One is when we first got what is effectively a data center, all of the servers and things that were in a giant room in our building. When we first got a computer system, we had to put special cooling in there because those things ran really, really hot.
Yep.
Did it heat up the whole building? No, but it was hot in that room, and so they had to cool it down. And my husband made an observation the other day, and he says, but some people are saying that these data centers are going to increase the temperature, the outside temperature in the area where they are by as much as 16 degrees. I mean, and for us, that sounds catastrophic because we already live in a climate that can get up to 120 degrees. So you add another 16 on top of that, and we're pretty much all going to melt. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But he made an observation. He said, cars, when they're run at 400 degrees.
Mm.
Okay. And there's millions of cars on the road, and the outdoor temperature is not affected by that. So it's unlikely there might be a slight increase directly around the facility, but it's more likely that it's going to be controlled inside the facility, just like it was in the 80s when we were first putting in a computer system and we had a whole room of data devices. They were hot in there, but we kept them cool and they were fine, but the whole building didn't heat up. So that's kind of how I
Mm.
compare how a data center may well work. Now, it could heat it up some, but I don't think it's going to have an impact as you get farther away from the center on on the surrounding area. I think maybe just directly right there, but that'd be it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought it was a great video. It was done by Business Insider, and it was by investigative reporters, and they were looking at this topic. It's about 8 months old, so that I would say not a lot has changed in the last 8 months as far as the type of build and that kind of stuff. But they were saying there are 1,457 in the U.S. data centers that are hyperscale. They're basically built for AI. And that's a little bit misleading because the same person or the same data that said there's up to 16 degrees raised the outside temperature also said that we have about 5,000 in the US. That's including all of them since they've been built since early 20s. So it's or 2000. So it's a little bit misleading, these hyperscalers, but kind of going on that same thing. I remember we had a little issue with our air conditioning the last few days, and we had to have somebody come over and take it out, fix it. But I realized when you're standing next to your air conditioner and it's working, what temperature of the air is actually being blown out? It's the hot air, because what's happening is replacing the hot air in your house with cold air, and the hot air has to go someplace, and it's being blown out in the air. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to do that because that's heating up our environment around us. No, it's probably having almost zero effect, especially if I just get off the roof and stand on the sidewalk. I don't feel it. Do you?
Right. No.
And
No.
yet we're making a huge assumption that this is going to do this. And I think my question is this, or my ask is this, is no matter which side you stand on, I'm probably more moderate than leaning one way or the other, because as I look at both cases, I'm like, hey, I don't want a data center that would do this, and this, but how much of this is actually accurate, or their fear tactics to rile people up to say, I don't want these in my backyard. It's called NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And now all of a sudden there's a moratorium on them and we can't build them. Here's the challenge of that, Leslie. The cost of using AI has plummeted. In other words, what's happened is, to use this now, think about it. When it first came out, who used them? Big corporations, very select few. Now everybody and their brother-in-law have it on their phone, and it's an app. And now instead of asking Google, we ask ChatGPT or Claude. We are, and I hate to say it, but we're somewhat hypocritical, because we're saying, hey, we don't want those data centers, but I really want the benefits of AI.
Right.
Wait a second. In essence, you're contributing to the problem that you said exists, but you don't want to give up that value. And so I think we have to look at this a little differently and say, wait a minute, if it really is that bad, what are the issues? And I'm going to point out just one thing that I wasn't aware of is this. The build of these data centers are a lot, Leslie, in residential areas. They really pointed out in West Virginia that they're built right in the middle of neighborhoods, and they're huge. They're like, 800 to a million square feet, 800,000 to a million square feet. And the one thing that they complained about, it was not heating up the environment. You know what it was?
Mm-mm.
It was the noise it made. It makes a
Humming noise, right?
humming noise.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It's not like living next to the airport. If you live at near LAX, or you're, large airport, it's not that. It's below the level. I think it's like 40 decibels. Don't quote me on that, but it's a very low, but it's that low hum. And that one thing is impacting the surrounding neighborhoods, a very small area, like, not within 10 miles, but like within, yards, hundreds of yards of the facility. So it's not affecting everyone. So if I were in that neighborhood, would I be opposed to that? Damn straight I would. We got to figure out how to fix that. But if I'm living 6 blocks over and it has no effect, it's not bothering me, right? And so I have to be cognizant of that.
I'm sure they'll come up with dampeners. I mean, you've got AC units that do the same thing. I've had clients that have them, and they're outside a bedroom. And so the constant, when it kicks on, and then the humming of the condenser or the compressor is annoying.
Yeah.
So they have dampeners you can put on those things. So it takes the sound way, way down. And I'm sure they'll do the same thing for that, because if that's annoying somebody, they got to find a solution for it.
Well, I think I think, Leslie, this goes back to our last episode when we were talking about processes. It's like we build it and then we test it. And if there's something not quite right, fix it. But it
Right.
doesn't mean let's scrap the whole thing. And that's the part that I think for me, where I'm like, you're asking us to stop the future from happening by putting your feet down and screaming and hollering and putting up banners. And I respect that. But sometimes it's with false or misleading information.
Yeah.
And that's the rub. That's the piece that gets me excited. If you can't tell.
I can tell you're on your soapbox. I just really wanted to talk about data centers today to try to give people another perspective about them and to share what we know about them. I know that everybody talks about the AI race and that China and the US are in this big race to win AI and you kind of have to, because my understanding, and again, you're the expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that he who has control of information is going to win, right?
Yep.
Because the next world war won't be with guns and ammo and stuff. It's an information war, which we're already engaged in, really. There's all kinds of subversive tactics being used by all countries trying to monitor and fraud and all these things that happen. And so whoever has the best data information is going to be superior to everybody else. Now, some people will say, well, I understand that China has 500 state of the art data centers already, and we have 1,500 or 5,000, depending on whose narrative you're listening to. And unfortunately, none of those, except maybe some of the 15, are up to the state of the art that China has.
Right.
So it's really important. We did another analogy the other day. I think I told you this, is that my sister, she hit the gas instead of the brake one day and hit her car up against a wall in a parking garage. She barely hit it. When you looked at it, it didn't look that bad. Okay. But the cars today are mostly plastic or, fiberglass or whatever they make to make them lighter and better gas mileage and all that stuff. And so when the insurance company got involved, they scrapped her car. They totaled
Oh,
it.
wow.
Totaled it. And I think the repair quote she got was like $7,000. Okay. Which is, in the scheme of things, compared to the cost of a new car, doesn't seem like that much. But the cost to put that car back together was more effort and cost than that car was really worth. Because what you pay for it on the lot is not the value of that car, right? We all know the minute you drive it off a lot, the value goes way down. So that's how I look at data centers. You really can't necessarily convert all the old ones to be the state of the art, because the cost of doing that, you might as well start over. You've got all the technology stuff that has to go in there, the layouts, how you whether it's fiber optics or whatever they're using. Probably it's just space these days. Whatever they're using to carry all the load of this stuff, how they're generating their own power, because all these data centers are now generating their own power to support them. I don't think people understand that you just can't convert something, because it's way more cost effective to just build it from scratch. It seems wasteful, but our world has evolved into a new age of information. I mean, remember when the internet took off? Was that the 90s,
Yep.
80s and 90s, right? When the internet took off, that was like, oh my gosh, right? That was so cool. And today, I won't be surprised if the internet fills up at some point and that they have to move to something else, because look at how many videos get added every day and how much posting is done every day. I mean, some of the people I follow are just regular Joe Schmo people with a cell phone in front of them talking online, and you can't manage all this data with the old technology that we used in the 80s and the 90s. You've got to come into this century and utilize the new functionality and capacity and AI enabled function that allows you to continue the growth, right? So I think that's another misconception that some people have, that we have all these things, so we're competing, and we're really not. We need to get newer, better stuff, and all the jobs that creates, not only the building and the working in the data centers, but building all the equipment that goes into these data centers. That's a ton of jobs. I mean, we need people to have jobs, and so I think that's not a bad thing, not to me.
Well, yeah, and I just to put things in context here, this race we're talking about, it's who gets first to artificial general intelligence. You might hear it called AGI, and that's where the computers are building computers. They're improving upon themselves. We're not very far away from that. And when we think of this race, as of last week, we're doing this in the second week of June, is we only have about a 6-month, excuse me, a 6-month lead on China, which is the only other real country in the race. If you look around the world, there are no other, there's none of this going on in Italy. There's none of this going on in England. No.
What about
China.
India? Not India?
Nope. There's China and the US. Now, the good news is we here in the US, most of our models are used around the world. China, they're not, because of, well, there's a trust factor there, right? There's a trust factor. But if we as a nation say, okay, we're going to put a moratorium, we're going to pause any new things coming out for at least 6 months, we've lost the race. It's just that simple. And, even there's been some rules in Congress that said, hey, now if any new models come out, we as the government need to review them for at least 30 days before you can put them out in the wild. In other words, get them to the public. I'm not against it. I'm not for that. I'm like, I'm having trouble. Like, if you, Leslie, had a new idea, do you have to have this overlord of the government that says, before you put that out, Leslie, let's really take a look at it. Let's have this other body over here take a look at it and decide whether or not you can really do that.
How are they going to evaluate it? They don't have the knowledge to evaluate, and they certainly, it's doubtful they would have the foresight to say how it could be used in a bad way.
No clue.
Right? I mean, that's the scary part. And again, I go back to the fact that, and we're sort of talking about AI and not data centers right now, but people have been manipulating, and there's the dark web, there's, which I've never seen, but I've heard about it. There's all kinds of hackers and programmers and people doing bad things in the world. I know somebody personally that got taken for $10,000 because of somebody online convinced them to send them money. I don't know why in the world anybody would do that, but I know somebody that happened to. So it really does happen. And I don't see how regular average people, Congress people are just people. They're not experts. They're not scientists. Some of them might be, but they're not really scientists. They're not programmers. I mean, how would they know this functionality from that functionality? I can't imagine.
Well, I don't want to be too harsh. But do we want to give a group of people that can't balance a budget and we're trillions of dollars in debt? Do we want to really give them that additional responsibility? They've already proven that they're not responsible enough, right? You and I, we have to balance our checkbooks. If it says there's no more money in the bank, we can't just keep spending. We have to stop. So I'm a little bit hesitant on that.
Yeah, but this is not about politics per se. It's about a body of human beings.
Yeah, but it's going to be political. You know that.
Well, I know that people are going to interject politics into it. They always do. And this is not an attempt to do a political podcast. But just forget sides, just human beings being what they are. I don't think there's anybody in there capable, except unless it's somebody like Elon Musk or the guy that does, I don't know who does which one, the
Sam
different
Altman, you've
Sam
got,
Altman,
yeah,
yeah, all the different
Dennis
people.
Asaba
Yeah,
for
all those
Anthropic.
guys, they understand, they get it. I don't know if Zuckerberg, I assume he does.
Yep, he's got it.
Those yeah, those guys understand, AI and what it does. I used to have a client that was, he made a lot of money selling a game. He built a game, I don't know which one or what kind. He just built a game back in the day and made a ton of money on it.
Mm,
And then he was in AI programming, and they were working at the time on how to create artificial intelligence then. Okay. And I couldn't even tell you how long ago it was. This stuff happened so fast. I'm not sure how long ago this was. And he was telling me that they were having difficulty because the synapses in our brains fire differently for everybody. We all
yeah.
have them, but they're all different. And then you add in the complexity of somebody with cerebral palsy, or somebody with some kind of mental disability, or somebody with bipolar, and you start adding in all these different um, afflictions about how our brains work, and then trying to replicate that to create a logic computer, basically. Right. And they've done, I mean, it's coming so fast now that it's hard to even comprehend. So the need for data centers is not a question. I mean, we absolutely have to have them. I hope that people who watch this particular episode will at least consider that they may not have all the information they need. There's so many people putting videos out that are talking about all this bad stuff that happens with data centers, and most of it's not accurate, or it's twisted in a little bit of a way because people don't want these things in their backyard. It reminds me of dog parks, you know. When I was working up at one of the communities here, I was on a planning committee for events and things to make the living in that community better, and everybody wanted a dog park, but
Mm,
it was all NIMBY. Nobody wanted it in their backyard, right? Because they thought it would smell, they thought it would be noisy, they didn't want it. And so we end up putting up temporary dog meet and greets every year, just for a day, and that made people happy. But a dog park properly managed does not have excessive odor, does not have excessive noise, does not have damage to the yard because you fertilize the grass and you take care of it. And there's ways to make a dog park attractive to the neighbors. And so this is kind of the same thing, but on a much, much bigger scale. It's kind of the same thing. But I did want to ask you about water, because that's the other thing I hear a lot about. And I'm not sure that the information I'm hearing is accurate. So they're saying that what I'm hearing them say is that the amount of water it's going to take to run these data centers could run areas out of water. Is that true?
Well, first of all, the older data centers are very water demanding, and they can use anywhere from 500,000 to a million gallons of water a day.
Wow.
The newer ones, which again, if I were in my community, I would demand it has to be what's called a closed loop system. And now it might do a 500,000 gallons to a million gallons a year. Big
Mm.
difference, right? So they are more efficient from that. Now, to put things in context, an average golf course in the Coachella Valley will use every day between 500 and a million 500,000 and a million gallons of water every day.
A
Now,
day
a
for
day.
these golf courses?
Yes. Now I want you to kind of think, well, how many golf courses are there in Coachella Valley?
There's
Let's
like
just say
400.
no, there's over 100. So that
Oh, with
means we
HOAs.
are sucking water out of our water resources at about 100 million gallons a day.
Wow. I did not know
And
that.
I haven't seen one person go to a chamber of commerce meeting, a city council meeting, and complain about that
No.
versus something that would do what it's supposed to do for our future and they're all over it. So I just want to put that in context. I want you to think about this as like, ideally, the way this works is it's like the radiator system in your car. If you think about it, how often, Leslie, do you have to fill the water in your radiator of your car?
Never, unless you get a leak.
Exactly. The same kind of thing. It uses that water, recirculating that water, cooling it, putting it back in there, and cooling it down. So the amount of water that's being used, the statistics they're using are usually pulling up data from the old manufacturer, the old way to do it. Think of it like a refrigerated air unit or a swamp cooler. Swamp
Mhm.
cooler uses a lot more water because it is constantly being used and then recycled, or excuse me, and then dumped and then being filled back up again. In a refrigerated, it's like it's using that same coolant over and over, and it might go the entire life of the system and never have to recharge it with Freon. So make sure you get your information correct before you stand up and say, not in my backyard because of the water usage, because it can be very misleading. And again, I challenge you to look at the numbers. Those are the numbers out there. The average golf course in the Coachella Valley is between 500,000 and 1 million gallons, closer to 1 million gallons a day. Farmers in the Coachella Valley typically use about 1 million gallons of water every day.
For
But we're not
irrigation.
protesting. Yeah, but we're not protesting the farmers. We're not protesting the golf courses. You know, we have new developments coming online here in the Coachella Valley, and like, wow, did we really need this? Because look at all the golf courses we have already, and we're going to build another golf course and add homes to it. How many gallons of water? How much electricity are they using? I don't see anybody protesting on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's just more of a, this is new. This whole concept of these data centers are new, and it's there's just a lot of misinformation, and I think you're right. I think it's based on of the old data centers and not the new ones. I mean, everybody in this country, especially the government, is very focused on conservation and trying to efficiency and doing
Mhm.
things. I mean, they keep changing, for example, the Southwest um, freon requirements so that it's less harmful to the environment, and it's expensive to do that because every time you change the freon in an HVAC system or cooling system, air conditioner, it cost the manufacturers money to redo their tooling and to change the way the thing works. And so then people wonder why our air conditioners are so expensive out here. Well, that's why, but you still, so I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that people are conscious of water, electricity, heat, that sort of thing. And there are a lot of things in our environment that do create heat, that do create, that use water, that use electricity. And if these things are self-generating and self-contained, the way they're proposing them, I don't see what's wrong with them. I look at the benefits. If you drew two columns and say pros and cons, pros are we have to have them for AI. You just have to, and you have to stay on top of AI because information is the new frontier, right? And then jobs
Or
for
instead
people.
of information, intelligence.
Well,
Intelligence
intelligence.
is a new frontier, different
Well,
from information.
but there's some humans that are not that intelligent. I'm
But
sorry, I had to say
if they have one of these, and if they have
they
one
can
of these,
pretend to be smart. Yeah.
they can be smart. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, I hear the videos that I see that pop up in my feed are all negative.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing anybody take the positive side. And I think it's because they're afraid. I mean, I know for one, you are reluctant to speak up. You didn't even want to do this podcast today because you're worried about repercussions. And all I'm saying is we're just having an honest conversation about what these things are and what the truth is.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the right word. What
yeah,
the truth? What is the truth?
yeah,
Like,
because people have a right to believe however they want. And you can't convince them to see your point of view. But if you put the facts out there, maybe somebody will listen to them and and say, wait a minute, let me do some more research on this. I think as a society, we're just all too eager to accept what we see online as gospel, and it's not all, most of the time, it's not.
Yeah.
These influencers and stuff, that's a contrived lifestyle. Those people don't look like that when they wake out of bed. They don't act like that. They don't live that way necessarily, And so a lot of it is totally contrived. And I think that I think social media is probably the worst thing to have happened to our country, to the world in general, what it does to kids and how it affects people. And I wish that I'm hopeful about the trend of turning phones off in school. I think that's gonna make a difference, and the different things to get people back in the present instead of lost in a screen, it's
I think
scary.
I think we're probably I'm gonna go on record saying this. I think we're within 5 years, we won't have phones, that
No, I don't think so
we
either.
won't need them.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the other thing I wanna point out too is I said we're in a race with China. Here's a difference between us and China. China, think of it just like the East Coast, West Coast of the US. Well, what they've done is this is a government mandate. It's a different world over there. If they said they're going to do it, that's what they do. So they're going to Eastern China where the land is abundant and it's very cheap, and they're building these data centers. And the other thing is they are so far ahead of us with solar production. So now they're energy efficient. And so it's making the other pushback of, well, it's putting a strain on our grid because this honestly, Leslie, this is why they build data centers where they propose them, is because there's already a place they can plug in. There's already a grid network, versus saying, well, let's just build out in the middle of the desert, all this desert land. Yes, but there's no production lines. There's no place to send that, to connect. And so that's the missing component. And quite frankly, that's why now data centers are being proposed. In fact, there's already a company doing this where they're putting data centers in space, because now heat is not an issue because it's minus 250 to minus 450 degrees. They don't need
Right.
water because the air is so cold. And they'll be able to beam that information wirelessly back down to back down to Earth. I was going to say the US, to Earth. So that could be the ultimate answer. I even saw where I think it's Japan or China actually went online a couple weeks ago with the first underwater
I hadn't
data
heard that.
center. Yeah, it's underwater data center. So it's using the water around it to cool it. My only question with that is, like, how much is that heating the water around it, and is it dissipating and it's not making a big deal? If that's the case, that's a good play. But how many can our ocean put up with?
My first thought is the salinity of the water and the wear on the components of the actual outside of whatever that data center is in, because as you know, anything that's on the salt water has a tendency to corrode, and even
Yeah.
boats have to come in to be gone over to get all that corrosion off of them. So I can't imagine, my brain thinks manufacturing, so I'm like, how in the heck do they do that? You
Somehow
know,
people smarter than me, that
I
they figure
guess.
this out. So they're running their data center, and it's a test for saying, hey, if we can't have it on land, then let's have it in the ocean. Nobody's going to see it. It won't disrupt anybody. But the other place is in space. There's actually, like I said, there's a company, I think it's out here in California, that is sending their data centers to low Earth orbit. In fact, they're even using Elon's Falcon 9 Heavy to send them up there, and they're massive. They're massive. And now most of the time they're being solar powered, because these solar grids that they open up, now watch this, they're 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers. They're massive.
Wow.
And, so they're doing this already. And, the difference is when Elon goes up there and does it, they're called Dyson swarms, where there might be 1,000 to 1,000,000 of these data centers swarmed around each other. And it's the terafab in the sky, or excuse me, it's the data center hyperscaled in the sky at low Earth orbit. And so it's getting all the power it needs. It can send it information back down to us, and it's not heating anything up.
You know, it's
There's no negative.
What I'm thinking of is that pretty soon we aren't gonna be able to get to Mars because there's gonna be so many satellites and data centers around the Earth that you won't be able to get through it to be able to get to Mars.
It's funny that you bring this up because a friend of mine, he's a boater. He loves like he has an app, and you can go on there and you can see wherever every boat in the world is on the ocean. And I think, oh man, there's a lot of boats in the ocean. But when you're on that ocean, you can't see any of those
I
other
know,
boats.
true,
And the same
true.
thing about the sky. There's an app you can look at where all the satellites are, and you're thinking, holy crap, there's a lot. But when you look at their tens to hundreds of miles apart, you can't even see them. And
It's
so there's a
amazing.
lot of space out there.
It's
So
hard to comprehend that stuff, you know?
yeah.
I was trying to figure out the other day, what the universe is in,
Oh,
because it can't be just everything has to be in something. I just can't my brain can't grasp. I tried to read Stephen Hawking's books about
mm,
quantum gravity and stuff, and I had the same problem. My brain just went on tilt, and I could not grasp it. And I'm a pretty smart person. I should be able to get this, but it was like, this makes no sense to me. So that's why I always think about. But if you can put that stuff up there and it works up there, then why wouldn't you do it? I mean, I don't know what the cost is of that versus putting it on the land or the benefit to it.
yeah, the big thing is, as the cost to launch goes down, you see that, Elon's sending up rockets twice a week on
Mm,
East Coast and West Coast. And ideally, his projection is he would like to get to one an hour.
wow.
And that's sending these satellites up and creating these Dyson swarms, if you will. Um, they're not the only
So
ones.
so maybe
Amazon's
this
going to
won't
want
be
to do
the
it.
so maybe yeah, that's Blue Origin, right?
Yeah,
Amazon.
yeah.
So maybe this isn't a big deal. Maybe they'll solve the NIMBY problem by putting them in space.
Well, the challenge with the only challenge we have there is honestly, we're probably 3 to 5 years away from
Oh, we'll
scaling
lose
that.
by then.
So
Yeah.
it's important that we don't just take our foot off the gas and say, oh, we can just coast. We'll just wait for this other one to come. And no, we have to keep doing this. I really do. So the big thing about data centers, and I think you said this, I'm going to reinforce it, is just know the truth. What's the
Yeah.
truth? Don't look at how it used to be and use that to decide on how I feel about now, because what's really behind the data centers? How are they being built? How are they being maintained? What's the fallout effect? I didn't realize this. I mean, I knew that in case of power outage, that they have generators, massive numbers of generators. So if you think of a hyperscaler, you might have, these massive generators, and you might have 100 of them that fire up. Well, okay, they're gonna create some pollution. What is that? What's the downside? And know that, because we don't have that backup. A lot of them are starting to build their own power sources with small nuclear devices. I think
Reactors.
that's
Yeah.
something that Jeff Bezos is doing. And then or excuse me, Bezos is doing the one off 3 Mile Island. He is regenerating 3 Mile Island. I think it's going to come back online in August. That's where he's going to power his data center. So it's not going to have a negative effect. But here's what I wanted to say is there's resistance because of the power as well. So why not, if you're going to build a data center in this area and it's going to strain the grid, why don't we say, you know what? Every home within a certain radius that's impacted by this, we're going to pay to have solar put on your home that would make your home not
Efficient,
necessarily, it'd be efficient. You wouldn't have to use any of the power on the grid anyway.
right?
Wouldn't that be a positive thing to say, oh, okay, good. They're going to put solar in my house, going to put batteries on my house. And at the end of the day, it's probably less expensive for that data center to do that than to bend over backwards to try to make something else happen, instead of saying, this is what we do. I think that's the power answer. Again, I don't know for sure what the water answer is, because still, 500,000 to 1,000,000 gallons of water is still a lot. It's not as
But a
much as a
year.
golf course a
Yeah.
day, but it's still something like, I think let's not wait till we don't have any before we try to think of a solution.
That reminds me of another story that I had a client who lived in it was a apartment building, but they converted it to condos, right? So all the apartments were actually condos, and there was an association and all of that stuff. And there was a big hotel going up near to that condo, and the hotel proposed people were fighting it because of noise. They thought there'd be too much traffic noise. They thought there'd be too much noise from the hotel. So what they did is they went in and proposed and got an agreement to replace all the windows in that condo with
Mm,
double paned, uh, sound deafening windows, so that people could still that the hotel could be there and they wouldn't have that problem. So there's always a solution. There's always a way to find a how can I get it done instead of all this negativity and why I can't, you
yeah.
know?
I
All
would
I
love to
know Oh, go ahead.
know all you know.
I say all I know for sure is that we have to have them and they have to be somewhere. And we want to be first on this data control and the intelligence control of data. And so or at least we want to be even. Maybe we don't want to be first, but we want to at least be even. We definitely don't want to fall behind. Because that's the way the world's going. So I wish people would at least look at what the facts are, consider the options, and then decide, am I really against this or am I not?
Yeah.
Don't just listen to what one person has to say, no matter how loud they are. Some people are very loud and vocal about this, and that's true for anything new and different. People are afraid of change. And so anything new and different it's going to have detractors always. How many
Yeah.
times look at how many oh, excuse me, but look at how many new water parks there are out here, the surf clubs, right? There was just one in Palm Springs. Now there are 3 that I know of, maybe
Mhm.
4. Okay. They use a lot of water. They take up a lot of land. They're noisy and fun and all that stuff. And this is a desert, and we have water surf parks here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, people fought that for a really long time too, just when they did the first one, but now there's 3 or 4. So, progress doesn't stop for 1 or 2 voices.
Yeah. And I think as we become more technologically advanced, we figure out ways to do things in places that are not normally the place where those things happen. Water parks, as an example. Those
Right.
actually, why don't you just go to the ocean and get a wave over there? That's
Yeah.
natural. No, we're going to figure out how to do it here in the desert. And all of a sudden, that's another reason to come to the desert because it's really an oasis and you can do that. I want to kind of wrap up, or I want to kind of put a bow on this for me is like, you know what I'd love to have is I would love to have someone who is so much more knowledgeable that they are actually building the data center.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
And they can say, here's the reality. Here's what we're doing. And the reason I bring this up is because I listened to a podcast called Moonshots. And these 4 people on there, they're freaking brilliant. And they have said more times than I can count on both hands. I don't know why people are so upset because they're upset about the water when it actually uses very little water to keep it cool. And I think that's a closed loop system. But if that's what they're really building, why don't we have people explain that?
Well, I
And
think
if
we
it
do at the city councils.
well,
It's
but
the
I don't think those I think those seems like those are the people who are riled up about one side and not the other because again, it's like to me it felt potentially like, hey, if I spoke up, and I told you this, I was like, you asked me why I didn't say something the other day. I said, that was not a hill I wanted to die on. I was the only
Right.
one not clapping when this person spoke. And I'm not interested in getting that conversation because I like my life. And that's honestly, that's my concern is these people they're whipped up.
Well, that's always the way. The people opposed to things are always the loudest, and sometimes they have misinformation. And I'm sure that the people that want to build these are talking to the city council. I know they put a moratorium on one in one of the cities in the east here, but only for 2 months. It wasn't a long moratorium, so it's not gone, and they'll probably go in. I expect that they will get in, but
Well, the same
um,
group is asking the county now to put a moratorium on data centers. The whole
well, hopefully they
Riverside
got smart
County.
people.
Yeah,
If it's really bad, then they should do that. But
I
I
agree.
really, but from everything that I've read, that I've actually, looked at seriously, it seems like they're taking the proper precautions and are conscious of the environmental impacts and want to help the environment. So I don't know if it's a bad thing or not. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, there's a thing called Jevons paradox, and it's where things become, that used to be finite have now become infinite. And so it means more people are using it. So it's putting more strain on the system. And and that's kind of where we're at now. We have gone from a very few people using AI to now everyone has the ability to use AI. And not only that, Leslie, but our cars use AI. So there's a
Right.
strain on that. Our homes are using AI, smart TVs, smart this, smart that. Everything we do, and there's going to be
Uh,
robots coming online that are using AI.
your Tesla drives itself.
Drives itself because it has AI. And so all we're doing is we're saying, well, this can now use AI on this. So when that does, it puts more strain on the demand for data centers. So I think my closing thing is like, you know what? I'm for a data center that is safe for people around them.
Right.
Could it be one of those things like there are some uncomfortability, like, okay, it has a hum. When it gets to the point where it now is like so low it doesn't bother anybody, and my dog doesn't, I don't have a dog, but if I had a dog it doesn't bother them either, then okay, what can we be doing to make it better? If it is, can we make them so it does use less water? Can we make it so the heat dispersion? Because I've been told this, that if in my discovery, if I went to a casino here in the desert and I stood beside the building and I put my hand up, I didn't touch the building, put my hand up, and I felt the heat coming off the building or a hospital, that's about the same heat dispersion that a data center would have. So to
Well,
say within 6 miles is going to 18 to up to 16 degrees, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that one.
yeah, it is hard because we have problems every summer where because we get so hot here that the plants next to a block wall suffer because they get burnt and scalded from being up against that block wall because it does absorb heat.
Yeah.
This one is dispersing heat, but I'm sure, just like you said with your house, you painted it a light color and the amount of heat coming off of it is much less. I'm sure
Yes.
they take that's why so many of these new buildings are white, that I don't know if you've noticed, but all across the desert and all the new tilt up buildings are all white
I think that's
buildings.
great.
And I'm sure that has to do with heat disbursement and or absorption because it just deflects it. So I have not found anything yet that I found credible to say why we shouldn't have those.
Yeah.
I hear and see the videos of people who say we shouldn't have them, but when you investigate it, I can't find my own credible reasoning that says not to do it. So I don't know. Be interesting to see how this all pans out.
Yeah, and this isn't just happening in our community, Leslie. It's happening all across the country. There are
Right.
other environments that are not happy about this. And at the end of the day, I wish we could just say, hey, there are swaths of vacant land that never anyone will live in. That's where we should build a data center. Even Elon said, hey, if we just took the northwest corner of Utah and we took that small uh, uh, area and we built what we needed there, like for solar, we could power the entire US. It's like, okay, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we
I
doing
know.
it?
I know.
Uh,
I drive across Arizona to go up to Prescott, and miles and miles and miles of nothing,
yeah,
just cactus. I
yeah,
mean, just on and on. So there's a lot of space. Now, I noticed that outside of Glendale, which is the Glendale in Arizona. They were building this massive factory. This was several years ago, and I think it was a chip factory, where
Mm,
they were going to build chips. And a lot of people were opposed to that for a while, but it created so many jobs and it did so much good for the economy there that I don't know that they're still facing. Well, it can't be facing opposition. It's all built and working now, but
yeah.
it's just everything always has a naysayer. And all the reason I wanted to do this today was so that we could ask people politely to do their own research and find the truth. That's all.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Well,
Okay.
Leslie, I was totally opposed to doing this, but I'm glad. I feel like my temperature has gone down a little bit.
I know
Just
you've been
just talking it
harboring
out.
this angst. Yeah.
Yeah, just talking it out. I hope you'll address it no matter which side you're on, and look at the facts. Don't look at the headlines and make a decision. Dig deeper. Dig deeper and find out, hey, is this true or is it not? Is it propaganda or is it factual? And then form your own opinion.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, I respect it as
Me
long
too.
as it's not driven on propaganda that has little or no basis for truth.
Yep. I agree.
All right.
We did a
Well,
serious podcast.
geez, this was serious. She was
Yeah.
serious. Believe it or not, this has not been the wind farm talking about data centers. Where actually, this is the Twisted, Bent, and Exhausted Entrepreneur podcast.
Well, and we don't
Um,
have any stake in any of this. So,
we don't.
we're just talking about it because we're hearing a lot about it locally, and they're talking about putting one in out here locally. And it's an interesting topic, I think. So, and it does play into all our AI conversations. So,
Well, Leslie, thank you for today's conversation. Since you brought us in, I'll let you take us out.
oh, well, thank you guys for listening to us and getting all the way this far and hearing us all the way through to the end. We appreciate that. If you like this podcast or you want know somebody else who's talking about data centers, by all means, please share, like it, tell everybody you know. I'm going to share it out to a couple of people once it comes online, and we thank you for being with us. We really enjoy doing this, and we hope you'll check out our other episodes. We talk about all kinds of how to improve your business. That's our primary topic, that and AI. And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye,
I'm
everybody.
Leslie Spoor with Concierge Business Solutions, and you're
Jeff Harrison with Swing Point Media.
see you later.